Okay. Okay. So are you ready there? Are we okay? Okay. A very good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Good afternoon or good night, wherever you're joining us from. On behalf of Young Professionals Society, YPS, and our collaborators, STEM Matters, I'd like to welcome you to yet another webinar. And we've been regularly holding these webinars on a weekly basis. And the aim of the webinars is to invite some professionals from different backgrounds, different fields, who come in and they speak about their areas of expertise. And they also give some advice to the youngsters about their profession, and also giving some insight into what the profession entails, and also about the line of work that they're involved with. These webinars have been brought to you and organized by the Young Professional Society, also our collaborative STEM Matters. And Young Professional Society was set up to help youngsters and to transform young people into becoming successful professional people. So it's been set up to help with personal professional development for the young people. And we do this by focusing on three areas. So the three areas or the three pillars that we work under are firstly communication. So we try to help youngsters to become better, more effective communicators. So we run speakers club, writers club. We also run some courses on public speaking, on storytelling, etc. So the aim is so that to try to help youngsters in improving and developing their soft skills. And also the second pillar that we work under is leadership. So trying to help youngsters develop leadership skills and become the future global leaders. And the third pillar is innovation, to try to teach youngsters and help them to innovate, to create. And we're very fortunate to be partnering and collaborating with STEM Matters, who are doing a fantastic job in the innovation field. They've been hosting a lot of programs that they're doing as well, and they're based in the States. So hopefully we should have some folks who are joining us from the States as well. So if you're watching this on live stream on Facebook, good afternoon to you all. I know Americans are a bit behind 5 or 6 hours. So this is the area of focus of Young Professional Society. And if you want to know more, or you want to become a member, or want to get involved with Young Professional Society and help us in our mission, these are the contact details that you can get in contact with. There's a website, and we're also active on the social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube. We have a YouTube channel that you can see all our programs and our webinars there, and Twitter, and the email as well. Similarly, you can also get in, if you want to know more about STEM Matters, they have the website, www.stemmatters.org. We do have Professor Sameer Iqbal, who's joining us today. Is that the correct website yet? www.stemmatters.org. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so you can find out about STEM Matters as well. And these are some of our collaborators that we work with: STEM Matters, Nanosmart Global, Almanica, Upsign, University Lincoln, Guidance of Faith Forum, and One Central Press as well. So that's enough about YPS. So moving on to the webinar today, we have a very special webinar, probably the first academic we have on our series, who's going to be talking about or giving information in how to become a university professor and flourish in academia, because there's a lot of youngsters out there who are still sort of studying in colleges or studying at universities and would like to become professors. So I think today's webinar will be very, very important, and it's an honor to have with us Professor Waqar Ahmed, who is a professor of nanoscience and nanotechnology, currently based at the University of Lincoln in United Kingdom. And he's also the deputy head of the School of Mathematics and Physics. And amongst his other interests, he's also interested in the application of technology in learning. He's done a lot of work for the youngsters. He's also published, he's the author and co-author of over 500 publications, which appear in peer-reviewed journals, books, book chapters, etc. He's supervised many PhD students, to be specific, 76 in total. And I'm one of his PhD students as well. Yeah, he's a well-known authority in the field. And I'm sure he's going to speak more about his journey and how he's reached where he is at the moment. So I think without further ado, I'm just going to hand over to Professor Ahmed. But before I do that, I would like to say that those people who are joining us in Zoom, and if you've got any questions for Professor Ahmed, please do type them in the chat box. And those people who are watching us on Facebook live streaming, if you've got any questions, please type them in the comment box, and then hopefully by the end, we will have a Q&A session and your questions will be answered. So Professor Ahmed, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Nasser, for the very kind introduction. I'm going to try to make this session as interactive as possible and take the questions as you go along. And perhaps you can answer some of my questions as well and type the answers into the chat, or raise your hand or unmute and ask the questions, please. Okay, so let me ask you a couple of questions to start off with. How many of you would like to travel the world, stay in the best hotels, eat in the best restaurants? Type in the chat yes, or raise your hand. Yes. Oh, thank you. That's all of you. How many of you would like to change the lives of people and make the world a better place? Raise your hand. Fantastic. Thank you. And how many of you would like to have the flexibility to go to work whenever you want, work on whatever project you want, anytime you want? How many wants the freedom, time freedom to do whatever you want? Fantastic, great. Thank you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you about my journey from Shadiwal, Pakistan to currently where I am at the University of Lincoln. So obviously it hasn't been an easy journey. There's been many challenges and many difficulties. So at the moment, let me share some slides with you. Can you see the slides?
No, not yet.
Something's already not. Hold on. Okay. So I've only got very few slides.
Okay.
And like I said, we'll try to make it as interactive as possible. Okay, so at the moment I'm at the University of Lincoln, and basically my role is Professor of Nanoscience. Just about maybe a few weeks ago, I was appointed Director of Enterprise as an additional role to the academic role. So how many of you have been to Lincoln? Put your hands up if you have. So very few people have been to Lincoln. So Lincoln, I'll just show you a picture of the University of Lincoln. So can you see the beautiful University of Lincoln at night? So if you haven't been to Lincoln, you're missing out on a lot. Yeah, how many now want to go to Lincoln? I haven't seen the pictures. So yeah, great, thank you. So everybody wants to go to Lincoln. So where is Lincoln? Lincoln is a small middle-class town in the southeast of England. So it's a bit on the side of the country, but it's a beautiful place, very friendly, nice people. And that's where I am currently, but I actually live in Chorley, which is near Preston. So my work is about 130 miles away from where I'm living. But as an academic, you've got the flexibility to work wherever you want, whenever you want. So before I came to Lincoln, I'll let you start. I'll tell you a little bit about where I come from. And I've found this picture on the internet. So this is a village, or they might call it a city now, but when I was there, it was a village called Shadiwal in Gujarat. And you can see some of the, this is, I think, the current day picture, but when I lived there was hardly anything there. So Shadiwal has just grown and grown and grown, and it's become a bit, maybe more of a city now. So in the 70s, so in the late 60s, my father came to the UK to work. And initially he worked in a Warden Goldstone factory. And later on he worked as a bus driver. Then we had a corner shop. I used to spend when we came to the UK in the early 70s, we spent our time working in the shop. The shop was open 7 days a week from 8 o'clock in the morning to 11 o'clock at night. And after that, we used to do deliveries, and Dad used to drive the van, and I used to deliver the groceries and the halal meat to all the Muslim families in Salford. And people used to come from miles and miles and miles just to get halal meat. And the shop was just opposite a council estate, so it was a very rough area. Basically, every other day, you'd get into an argument or a fight with somebody, because being very few Asians at that time, and it was a very difficult environment to survive in. And we went to Halton Bank Primary School in Salford, and I think there was only, when I joined, there was only 2 Asian people in that school, and couldn't speak English, really, really lacked confidence. And the teachers were really kind with me. But as a youngster, I was really shy. So I thought, if I speak in front of people, I was going to die. So I never spoke. So throughout my school days, throughout my college days, throughout my university days, I never spoke in front of a group. One-to-one, I was always good. But as a group, I avoided it. So even in the class, if there was you had to read out a passage, the teacher would go, go along, and the lesson would finish before it came to me. The next time they used to reverse it, and miraculously I was sitting on the front, so I didn't have to speak. So throughout university, I chose a degree, so I didn't have to give a presentation. That's how much fear I had of speaking. And also had very little confidence in myself. So it was always like, please Allah, I can just pass one O-level. I'll never ask you for anything else ever again. My ambition was to just pass one O-level. And now you call them GCSEs and stuff like that. So my confidence was that low. And then, but one thing that was to my advantage is I didn't have any goals or ambitions or dreams. It was just to pass that one O-level. And then, but I said to myself, I know I'm not going to pass, but let me give it, my best effort. So I gave it my best effort and got a few O-levels. And then it was like, oh my God, I passed my O-levels, yeah. And then it was like, oh, A-levels are so hard, I'm not going to be able to do my A-levels. So it was like, let me try and see if I can, get past year 1 of A-levels, and then I know I can't pass year 2. So eventually you got, the prayer became, oh Allah, let me just get enough grades to step into the university. I know I'm not going to pass my degree, but if I can just step foot on the university, my mom can say to her friends, oh yeah, my son went to university. That was my ambition. It wasn't to get the degree, it was just to get into the university. And throughout the university days, I was a bit of a loner, never spoke to anybody, and basically just said, oh, I know I'm not going to pass, let me try my best. And then eventually, you pass year 1, year 2, year 3, and then, I passed my degree. On the same day of my results, the head of department called me in, and I said, I'm going to get into trouble now. I don't know what he's going to say to me. Why is he calling me into his office? And he asked me, well, what are you going to do next? I went, sir, I don't know. You know, probably sell potatoes in my dad's shop. And he goes, oh, do you want to do a PhD? And I went, sir, what's a PhD? He goes, never mind what a PhD is. Go and see Michael Hitchman. He's got a PhD place, and you know, if you're interested, you can do a PhD. Went to see Michael Hitchman, and he said to me, I've got two projects. One is on corrosion science, and one is chemical vapor deposition for microelectronics, sponsored by General Electric Company. So he said, take the proposals home, read them, and let me know which one you want to do. So I went home, I read them, and I didn't want to do corrosion. I said, oh, I'll do thin films for microelectronics. In them days, microelectronics was like an up-and-coming subject. So, you know, then that's how I embarked onto a PhD. So straight from my degree, my results were good enough that I could go straight onto a PhD. And again, struggle through my PhD and so on. And I'll tell you the qualifications you need to go through to become a professor in the UK. I have no experience of academia other than the UK. I've visited many places. I've got many colleagues and friends, but this is the UK perspective. Perhaps that some Professor Samir can give you a talk on academia in Pakistan and in the USA. So when we first arrived in Salford, this is what Salford used to look like. So this is, you can see the houses. Yeah, there used to be lots of terrace houses in Salford, and we kind of rented one of these terrace houses, and we grew up in this kind of area. And you had these streets, and the streets we used to play football. And because there was hardly any footpath, basically you used to smash some windows and stuff like that and get into trouble. But straight after school, would spend, you know, 4:30 to 9 o'clock at night playing football day and night. And Manchester United Football Club was only, you know, walking distance from our house. So every other Saturday, we used to go and watch football. In them days, it was £2 to get a ticket at Stretford End, standing up. So this is where I grew up in Salford and stayed in Salford, Manchester area, more or less all my life. So in order to, if you're looking at the qualifications, so what qualifications do we need to become a professor? So how many people know what qualifications we need to become a professor? There's a few, thank you. So, like I said, this is the UK perspective. It's not anywhere else, it's just in the UK. So initially, nowadays, what do people do? You basically need to have the right qualifications to get a lectureship or to get into university. So the first qualifications that are important for youngsters is make sure they get good basics GCSEs in the sciences and the maths, so they get a good set of GCSEs. And from them GCSEs, you have to choose your A-levels. So I chose A-levels in subjects I was interested in. And luckily, my father didn't say, you must be a doctor, you must be a doctor, you must be a doctor, although my friends' mothers and fathers used to force their children that they must do medicine, they must do medicine. And even before the child is born, the mother is saying to the child in the belly, you must be a doctor, you must be a doctor, you must be a doctor. But, you know, my parents never had any ambitions like that for me. So basically, I chose A-levels, which I enjoyed. However, if you've got a certain perspective of what you want to do with your career, you have to choose the right A-levels. So if you want to do medicine, you have to choose chemistry, biology, maths, physics, the science subjects. And if you want to do accountancy, you must pick up maths here. So you have to get some advice on what A-levels to do to get into certain professions. And after your A-levels, so after my A-levels, I did a BSc. My BSc was very general, so I did a BSc because I didn't have any interest. I did a BSc in joint honours in science, so which was chemistry, physiology, and computer science. So a very broad spectrum of subjects during the BSc program, and I specialized in chemistry and biochemistry. And then after the BSc, many people go into an MSc. Luckily, I could go straight from a BSc to a PhD. So if you get good grades, you can skip that MSc phase. And I started a PhD, and within 3 years, I finished my PhD. And my PhD was sponsored by a company called General Electric Company. And in them days, that General Electric Company was the largest company in the UK. And when I wanted to do this PhD, my supervisor said to me, right, I need to check with whether General Electric will accept you or not as a PhD student. So, and because of my routine of, you know, being in the shop from 8 in the morning to 11 at night, 7 days a week, we never left the area, apart from going to school and home, university and home. We never traveled anywhere, never went to Pakistan, never did anything. Never been on a train. So when my supervisor said to me, I'll meet you at Euston Station at this point, I was trying to figure out, how do I get a train ticket, you know, and how much will it cost, and where's this Euston Station? And there wasn't the internet in them days that you can find out. So basically, just to get the train from my house to London was a huge challenge for me at the time. So luckily, I navigated my way through, and Houston wasn't that crowded in them days. And I met my supervisor, took another train to General Electric Research and Development Center. And without me knowing, it was like kind of an interview. So they started asking me lots of questions. And then one probably critical question they asked me is, what do you want to do when you finish your PhD? And I had no idea what I was going to do after my PhD. And I said, I'm going to come and work for you, of course. That's a natural progression. So they were pleased with my answer and ended up having a sponsored place to do a PhD. And then there's different routes you can get into university nowadays using doing access courses, BTECs, and lots of different routes in. But in them days, it was just you do your O-levels, A-levels, you go to university. There weren't any other routes of entry into university system. Now with widening participation, mature students can go to university and everything. And then there were very few people going to university from our communities, and there was generally from the population, a very small percentage of people went to university. But if you went to university, you got a degree, you're guaranteed more or less a job for life. So basically, that's what I did. I did my PhD, and during my PhD, I faced many challenges. Initially, I decided to do a PhD in microelectronics type field, thin films. And my supervisor was advising me to do corrosion science. So I was adamant, I want to do this microelectronics, thin films. And then he says, right, Waqar, come to me, I'll show you where you're going to be working. So I went to the lab, and there was a steel plate on the floor, nothing else there. And I was looking around, there was corrosion science equipment everywhere else, but there was just blank space in this lab. And I said to my supervisor, where's my equipment? He said, well, just imagine this is where it's sitting. It's not here yet. We have to design it and order it and everything. First 1.5 years of my PhD, all I was doing is trying to get design equipment and get the equipment in to do the PhD. So 0 results, just a lot of reading, and that was it. And initially I had this illusion, I don't know anything, I'm stupid, I don't know anything, And I had a routine. Every lunchtime, I used to go to the library. So I used to go to the library, and them days, they weren't electronic journals, they were like physical journals, and I'd go from A to Z, and I'll scan across, pick up a journal, read something interesting, put it down. So from 12 till 1, I used to do that, or from 12 to 12:30, and then I'd go for my Zohar prayer every day at the university. So this half an hour reading, 1 hour reading was, I thought, well, I've just gone through this, read the New Scientist, read this. So I kind of was absorbing this knowledge unconsciously without trying to absorb the knowledge I was just interested in. And then we used to have group meetings. At first, I felt really silly because everybody knew what they were doing. But eventually, I could chip in and I'd say, oh, yeah, you know, my son at IBM, he did this work and that. I could quote all these journals, quote the reference numbers, and eventually I went from being very poor to being a respected student within the group. And then my equipment came. And when my equipment came, my supervisor said, oh, you know, you've been a good student, but, you know, you haven't got any data. Maybe we need to extend your PhD for another year, 1.5 years past, you've got nothing. And I said, well, that's fine, sir. I'll just do the best I can. And then the equipment came, and then we had to interface it to the computer. And I said, sir, how do I interface this to a computer? So, oh, you have to write a program and do it yourself. So everything you have to do yourself. It wasn't like a piece of equipment manual to read. And then what happened is my supervisor announced at the few months later, I have a professorship at Strathclyde University. I want you to dismantle all the equipment and we're moving to Scotland, Glasgow. And I'd never lived outside Salford, and the thought of moving to Glasgow was like a nightmare. And I thought I've got 0 results, so basically I'll just have to pack in my PhD and sell halal meat and work in my father's shop. So obviously I used to, you know, go to Zohar prayer, and I used to say, oh, please Allah, find a way for me to get this PhD. You know, otherwise I'll be selling potatoes in my dad's shop. And I kept praying, you know, through Allah's blessing, you know, I'm going to get this PhD, but I can't see how it was happening. So I made a decision. I decided, right, I'm not going to dismantle my equipment. I'm going to get as many results as I can, and then I'm going to write up. So I had about 3 months where I worked day and night, and I used to sneak into the lab and just work, and nobody knew I was there. And I started getting results and accumulating results. And basically what happened is I didn't show my supervisor any results or anything. And then what happened, we had a visitor, one of my professor's friends from MIT, and my supervisor told everybody, oh, you come to bring all your data with you, and we're going to write this research paper. There's a conference in Sweden. We're going to go to Sweden. Whoever can write a good paper, they're going to be going to Sweden. So everybody, they said to me, Waqar, you go last, yeah, because obviously you don't have any data, let everybody else go first. So I went last, you know, and I used to take my files in a carrier bag. So I used to take my file in a carrier bag, and I put all these files in. I went to the meeting and I pulled one file out, and this professor from MIT started looking at my files, and he goes, oh, that's really nice. This is really good. You know, he started getting more and more excited with my results. And then my supervisor said to me, what else have you got in that carrier bag? I said, oh, I've got more results, sir. So bring them all out. So I put all the files out. And Klaus Jensen, who's still at MIT, he was the professor that came, and he says, oh, you got enough here for 2 or 3 PhD theses. And I'm thinking, I'm going to fail. And suddenly I had hope that I might get my PhD. And then after that, I moved to Strathclyde, stayed in Glasgow for a year, and then started working for a General Electric company. After that, I worked for another company, Ferranti Electronics, then Inmos, then VSW Scientific, and eventually to a technology transfer consultancy at Salford University Business Services. So my initial impression was, I don't want to go into academia. I'm not clever enough. I want to work on real life problems. I don't want to ponce around thinking because I'm not good at that. So then I was working for a company called VSW Scientific, making surface science equipment for universities. So we made surface science equipment for Liverpool Interdisciplinary Centre for Surface Science, David King at Cambridge, and John Ford from Oxford. So I was working with academics, and I was starting to like their personality and how they dealt with us. And I went to Oxford to give some talks and stuff, and I'm sure my talks weren't very good, but you know, I got good compliments. So I think they were just trying to be kind to me rather than my talk being good. So after then, I was in industry, and I was trying to get a lectureship in chemistry, and I applied, and I kept getting rejection after rejection after rejection after rejection. I got dozens of rejections, no hope of you know, getting a job in academia. But because I'd worked in industry, a lectureship came up in manufacturing technology. I applied for it. I had no education in manufacturing technology, but because I'd worked in the manufacturing industry, I could tell them what to do and how it actually works. And that impressed them enough to get me a job in, get me a lectureship. So general route in the UK then, if you want to become a lecturer, in them days, there was only one route. Yeah, if you want to be a professor, you have to do research. Now they have two routes. So there's a teaching and research route, and there is a teaching and scholarship and professional practice route. So after you do a PhD, a lot of people, they do what is known as postdoc or postdoctoral studies. And if you're in teaching, you might become a teaching fellow. And if you're really good as a postdoc, you might step into the lectureship arena. If you've got good mentorship, you've got good guidance, you've got good academic record, you can get a lectureship. So after you become a lecturer, you get promoted to senior lecturer. Now, luckily, I didn't have to do postdoc. I wasn't a lecturer. I went, because I had industrial experience, I went straight into becoming a senior lecturer. So that senior lectureship was in manufacturing technology in them days. And then I moved from that institution to Manchester Metropolitan, and I still went as a senior lecturer, but this time I went as a senior lecturer in chemistry. I published a lot more papers, my academic track record got better, and became a senior lecturer at Manchester Metropolitan University. And I thought, okay, now that I'm in there, and lectureship felt natural to me, and the environment felt natural. So I said, right, I made a decision, I want to become a professor. So I looked at all the professors in various different departments. I said, what do I need to become a professor? Number one, I need to write 100 research papers. Number two, I need to publish a book or so. Number three, I want to chair some conferences. Number four, I need to get £1 million of funding. That was really good in them days. So then I thought, okay, what's going to be the hard part? Writing 100 papers without any track record, without any PhD students. How do I write 100 papers? But because I was naive, I said, right, I'm going to write 20 papers a year, and 5 years I should be a professor. I can easily do a book, I can do a conference, and I can get some funding in. And basically what happened is, luckily, I recruited this young, ambitious PhD student. So this young, ambitious PhD student, he did his degree in the university, and we had an interview. My head of department was chairing the panel. I was one of the panel members, and there was another panel member. So the head of department decided to hire somebody. And what happened is I went out, and this young man that I hired was Dr. Nasser Ali, against the will of my head of department. So my head of department said, oh, we made a decision to hire somebody else. Why did you go and hire this guy? So I said, look, I know something about him. There's something about him that's special that you don't know. I've made my decision. That's the person I want as my PhD student. And he's like going a little bit crazy as my head of department. And then I thought, okay, the person that the head of department has offered a role to, it's unfair on him. Let me talk to another colleague and get this guy also a place. So luckily, both of them got a place to do a PhD. And so Nasser was very ambitious, hardworking, built up lots of collaborations, published lots of research papers. And then this other guy, after a year, he gave up. Yeah, he couldn't cope with the demand. So that gave me this gut feeling. My decision was right. Yeah. So we traveled all over the world. We had one little hot filament CVD system, a couple of students, and very quickly we built an international profile. So people in the top universities started noticing the group, and mainly due to 2 or 3 PhD students. Dr. Nasser is Dr. Israr, who's now the Dean of Engineering in Oman, and there was a guy called Ashfaq who worked for Philips. So basically, I was lucky to have really good PhD students right from the beginning. So after that, I applied for readership, and my head of department kept saying, no, you can't go and become a reader. It needs this, it needs that, it needs that many grants. I said, look, I've got 100 papers, I got this, I got that. Why can't I be a reader? And in them days, there was only 3 lecturers that were foreign in the whole university, and I was like one of them. So the Vice Chancellor knew me. Being different gave us an advantage that everybody knew our names. So basically, my head of department kept saying, no, you're not ready, you're too young, you're this, you're that. Excuse after excuse after excuse. And people who were less qualified, they kind of got in there, and they got promoted to reader. And then I got promoted, eventually I got promoted to reader after 8 years. So from my first academic position, I'd planned on 5 years. It actually took me 8 years to become a professor. And I hadn't considered in my calculation the biases, the lack of experience, the competition, and all these kind of factors. So there's all kind of other factors other than the track record that affects promotion to higher level. Then I became reader, and there was a vacancy for a professorship in the school, in the department. And I said to my head of department, look, I've got 150 research papers, I've got this, I've got that. I looked at the criteria, I fulfill the criteria. And he goes, no, you need this, you need that. I said, well, how many people in the department have got that or none? And he said, well, every time you go, you have to raise the bar keeps getting higher and higher and higher. And within about a month or so of being reader, I saw this vacancy at Ulster University, Belfast. And it was Professor of Nanotechnology. And I didn't want to go to Belfast. I'd heard, in them days it was a bit violent, and I'd heard all these bad rumors. But somebody told me, you got to apply, you got to apply, you got to apply. And I applied for this Professor of Nanotechnology in Belfast. And when I applied for this post in Belfast, it was in the School of Electrical and Electronic Engineering, but it was in the Institute of Nanotechnology. So that was my first step as becoming a professor in nanotechnology, which is about 20 years ago. So I kind of only had that ambition, never had the ambition of getting any higher than that. And then later on, it was like, oh, these people higher than me, they know better than me, but they're making all these decisions, I can make better decisions. Then I decided I want to get into kind of management type roles. And it was all like, I had business qualifications, I had business experience, I had the research papers, the networks, everything to get into management. It was always, oh, you don't have any line management experience, you don't have any line management experience. And it was always the same mantra, when I couldn't get in. So what happened then after a professors have various roles in the university. So of course, the first one, academics, you've got your own research group. Then you might be director of research for the department if you get a bit senior. And then maybe there's an institute that happens, if there's critical mass, so you might become head of institute. You might become head of department, head of school. Some professors' roles as head of graduate school. And then if you get enough management experience, you get a role as dean of school, dean of faculty. So I've been head of the research institute. I was head of the Institute of Nanotechnology and Bioengineering, which was inaugurated by Sir Harold Kroto, won the Nobel Prize for C60. And And basically, I've also got involved in setting up a new medical school from scratch. So I moved to different universities, and when I moved to University of Central Lancashire, 50% of my role was in a school. So it was School of Engineering to start off with, which is teaching and research. 50% I reported to the Deputy Vice Chancellor, who always had new initiatives. So the first initiative was, we want to build a brand new Burnley campus, and your input and expertise is very important here. So go and help Ken to lobby and get funding and get support so that we can build this new campus in Burnley. So I did that, and then after that, it was like, oh, we want to establish a medical school. Go and speak to Sinjan, who's the Dean of the medical school, Dean of Postgraduate School Medicine. Let's establish a proper big medical school. So as part of the senior management that established the medical school. Then it was like, I need a new challenge. And then I went to Lincoln as Deputy Head of School of Maths and Physics. And I tried to keep a low profile. And then suddenly I went to some meetings, and they asked for some ideas, and I gave some ideas, and they're right, we want to appoint you as Deputy Director of Research for the college. So the College of Science has got 10 different schools and research institutes. So there's geography, pharmacy, medical school, chemistry, engineering. So I became Deputy Head of Research for the college. And then the Head of Research, Director of Research for the college became, he stepped down, and then I was made Director of Research for the college. Then they decided, you know, you got some business experience, we want to create a new role for you. And so currently I'm employed as a Director of Enterprise, working with businesses. So I'm in a grade which is like Head of School, Dean, Director of Research, Director of Enterprise. So on this chart, my next role is to see if I can become Pro Vice Chancellor, Deputy Vice Chancellor, Vice Chancellor. I don't know if it will happen, how it will happen, but all I can do is obviously follow the same philosophy, is give it the best I've got and leave the rest to Allah. And that's always been the philosophy in that. So I don't know. I'm very happy with what I've achieved so far. I'm absolutely content. So at the same time, obviously, I want to help as many people as I can and fulfill my potential. So obviously in academia, there's lots of barriers. There's obviously biases, and whether you fit in, whether your face fits into that group. Then there's lots of skills like leadership you need to develop, communication, management, teamwork, lots of analytical skill. And also your character is very important. So your character, personality, resilience is very important. So basically, I've tried to have it all rather than sacrifice one thing for another. So I wanted a great family life. I wanted to be spiritual and follow my religious practices. And at the same time, I wanted to succeed in my career. And I wasn't willing to sacrifice any of them. So, for example, people want to fit in so badly, they sacrifice their values and their beliefs to try to fit in. With me, I said, no, these are my values, I'm proud of them, these are my beliefs, I'm proud of them. And if you stick to them, people will respect you. If you don't stick to your belief, you might think you fit in, but people won't respect you. So I try to have it all at the same time. And then there's also, what is the need of that department at that time? Then obviously you've got to be in sometime in the right place at the right time. So your instinct, intuition plays a big role. And when I tried to climb the ladder, I didn't really have any mentorship because there weren't any people from the Asian continent that were high up. So as a senior lecturer, I was probably the highest person from the Asian origin in that space at the time. Then as a professor, when I went to Belfast, I was the only Asian that was a professor there. In Lincoln, I'm probably the highest foreign person in the university. So I never really had proper mentorship. Maybe if I had some mentorship, I could succeed. And I think one of the aims of this Young Professional Society is, if it took me this long to get where I am, if I can teach people what mistakes I've made, they can probably get there in maybe 1/3 of the time. So basically that is why we set up this Young Professional Society, is to impart experiences of professionals and the mistakes they've made to youngsters so they can succeed much more readily and much more easier. So I'll kind of leave it there and see if there's any questions that people have got. Thank you for your attention. And I hope you found this little talk useful. See if we've got any questions, Nasser. Anybody got any questions?
Yeah. Let me just, I think there's somebody here, Umar, who's asked, how would you devise navigating the bias and discrimination in the workplace? Did you hear that? How can
have I stopped sharing my screen now?
Yeah, you can stop. You can stop sharing your screen.
Okay, yeah. Go on.
You should be able to read.
Yeah. The question was, how would you stop bias?
Yeah, I think there was a question. Let me just check that again. Yeah, how would you advise navigating the bias and discrimination in the workplace?
So basically, when I was at school, I was like the only Asian person in the school. Okay, so people in them days used to, if you had a characteristic that was different from the rest of them, you'd get picked on. So when you get picked on, it was like, you such and such a person, blah, 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 and they used to pick on your color. But then there was people that were overweight, yeah, and other kids in the school used to pick on them, oh, you fat this, you fat that, and they'd pick on their color. And somebody were tall and they'd pick on that characteristic as tall. So basically, generally people notice differences and they pick on their differences. And my attitude was always that my origin and my color is a huge advantage. So wherever I went, everybody knew my name because I was different from anybody else. So I chose to see the differences as an asset to me. So wherever I went, if I went to a conference, I was the only Asian person in UK in a conference, and it was like, oh, hello, Waqar, how are you? How's things at Salford? And people get related to me very quickly and very easily. So there's always going to be biases there. We all look at differences. We all have certain biases, but you have to use your difference as an advantage. But nowadays, obviously, there's rules and regulations against discrimination. So basically, although there's rules and regulations and differences, you can only change people's opinions by changing what's in their heart. So by being the best of you, you can change people's opinions of you. So I took it always as a challenge. If people are discriminating, I'm going to be even better than that. So it's hard to change other people's opinions. There's rules and regulations. There's lots of forms that you fill in. That doesn't mean there's no bias anymore. There's still lots of biases, but you have to show your strengths and capabilities and take it as a challenge.
Okay, there's another question now. Obviously, unfortunately, Brexit is going to happen now. So UK is going to exit Europe. Now, how does that impact academia in the UK? Also, students coming studying in the UK students going to Europe, and the research projects that your academics are involved with. How does that? So
obviously you've got Brexit that's happened. So the UK universities they used to get quite a bit of funding from the EU, from Europe, and quite a number of students used to come to the UK to study. And nowadays, I think the number will reduce after Brexit because they'll be treated as foreign students, international students. So if the home student fees, say to do a PhD is 4,000, if an international student fee, it might be 16,000, 20,000, depending on which university you go. So obviously, as the costs get bigger, people won't want to come and do study in the UK. So obviously it's going to affect the university research funding, it's going to affect the university recruitment, and also a lot of the staff are hired from EU countries, and they can apply for residencies in the UK, but then obviously you won't be able to hire as many staff from the EU. maybe it'll open up opportunities to work with international countries abroad a lot more with Brexit. So it's going to have negative impact on funding, negative impact on recruitment, but we have to be more resourceful and more resilient in order to cope with that difference.
Okay, there's another question by Dr. Irshad who says, what would you advise scientists working in industry who want to enter academia without having enough postdoc experience and probably not much publications as well? So he's working in industry.
Yeah, so that's the route I took. I was working in industry, and basically I came into academia. And in academia, industrial experience is highly valued now, and it's going to become more valued in the future, because research proposals, they are looking for statements of impact. So government is putting millions and millions of pounds into research, and basically there's lots of questions. They put all these millions of pounds into research. What is the end product? What is the benefit? How is it making people's lives better? And if you can have an application of your research at the end to make the world better or to make people's lives better, that's an advantage in getting research funding. So a lot of universities are looking for people from industry with industrial experience. When I came into academia, I didn't have any research papers, but I knew how to get funding. And also, when I came into academia, very quickly I wrote research papers on my applied research that I'd done in industry. So that gap is easier to narrow than going from academia to industry. So the reverse is harder.
Okay, we're going to take a question from Facebook. We have a question from Sami Amin. I'm not sure where he or she is from, but the question is, how important is it to have a good teaching philosophy, and what should be its main component to get a position as a lecturer in university?
So I know in America, teaching philosophy is very, very important. Here in the UK, they want to know, obviously they want to know what your research strategy is, how you're going to get funding. But in terms of teaching, they're not interested in the philosophy, they're more interested in, if you apply to, say, the school, Department of Mechanical Engineering, they're interested in what experience have you got and what modules can you actually teach. And if you've got quite a few number of modules you can teach, then there is this society called, there is this Higher Education Academy, or Advanced HE, and through them you can become an associate member, fellow, and a senior fellow and principal fellow. So you can learn all the teaching philosophies as you go along, as long as your field is in demand, you know what you're doing with your research, and you can teach modules where there is a need for a gap to be filled. I think maybe Professor Samir can answer that better than me, because in America, I think teaching philosophy is very important.
So that's one document they all want new aspiring faculty to write. And yeah, it's interesting that many universities don't train their PhDs on how to be better and effective teacher, but they expect incoming new assistant professors to have an extra kind of bent towards teaching. And now many universities are introducing kind of coursework to prepare students to learn what are different ways how you teach. But yeah, again, it is still here as well. It is a learning process that you learn on the job.
Yeah. So if you come from industry, obviously, you maybe don't have that teaching experience. But the main thing is, obviously, nowadays what's important in the UK is student satisfaction, student engagement, how you can engage the students. If you've got big classes, how are you going to, and also assessment is very important. How are you going to get feedback? And a lot of it is common sense, but obviously there's a saying that common sense is not that common. I don't know if I've answered that well enough. That was not a very good answer.
Yeah, let me, there's another question here. Can you survive as a professor in a UK university if you're not research active?
There are nowadays, obviously, it was very difficult to, you can survive as a, you won't be a professor if you're not research active in a UK university. You'll get a lectureship and you can survive as a lecturer, senior lecturer, just teaching and doing a good job at teaching. And then if you don't have much ambitions to progress, then maybe 80% of the academics, they become lecturer, senior lecturer, they stop there, and very few become professors. But now they've got this teaching, practice, and scholarly route, where if you do research and scholarship, if you do scholarship and professional practice, you could end up being a professor. So, but that's relatively recent in UK universities. Of course, you can survive if you do a very good job at teaching, but it's unlikely you'll be promoted to professor level. So in the UK, professor isn't anybody who teaches, a person who's reached a certain level of expertise in research, or it's called a chair. So I've got a chair in nanoscience, and that's what happens in the UK. When you become specialized, you become a professor.
Okay. Another question. You took the industry route after your PhD, so you worked in industry, and after several years, you decided to sort of return back into academia. But someone who gets their PhD, and can they directly go on to become an academic without having to go to industry? And
yeah, so
what route do they need to take?
Yeah, so basically, normally after people do their PhDs, if they want to stay in academia, they do postdoctoral research. So when they do postdoctoral research, they get more academic experience. But in certain subjects, if you've got a very highly shortage subject, and maybe in the UK a couple of years ago it was cybersecurity or whatever, then straight after your PhD you could get lectureship. So it depends on the subject, depends on the competition, and it also depends on the demand. In engineering or in chemistry, it's probably unlikely you can go straight from a lecturer to straight from a PhD student to a lecturer. But it has happened. It's not against the rules.
Okay. Yeah, of course, it's going to be a bit difficult going up the ladder, you know, in promotions and things like this. So how much politics is there involved in the academia, and what advice would you give to be able to sort of deal with the politics?
Yes, obviously there's lots of politics and there's lots of biases and there's lots of, and I struggle also myself to try and overcome. So sometimes what happens, you have to obviously build up your track record. So you build your record of teaching, you build your record of research, you build your record of funding, and you get to a level where you think, okay, I can get to the next level. And maybe, you know, at that level, your path, you know, there may be some discrimination, there may be your face doesn't fit, and therefore there's a glass ceiling. But in the world, there's lots of opportunities. And I faced that glass ceiling many times, and I had to go to a different university. So because my track record kept getting better and better and better, I looked for wherever there were opportunities. So sometimes, you know, you can just go through track record, and sometimes you have to move. And if your skills are that you're going to benefit that other institution, then they're going to want to hire you. So in a way, rather than as a stopping thing. And a lot of the times it's your own personal beliefs that are important as well, because if you think I'm never going to get promoted, there's discrimination, you'll stay there. If you think, well, I'll find a way, it doesn't matter, if I'm committed, I'll find a way, then you'll find a way.
Okay, so in the UK, the system is a bit different from, say, in Europe, America, and Canada. For example, in the UK, you have lecturer, senior lecturer, reader, professor. So say, for example, you have a professor in, say, Europe, and he wants to come and work in the UK. Could he sort of move into a full professor position? Is that equivalent?
So it's difficult. I mean, we had somebody in our engineering department who came from Egypt. In Egypt, he was a dean. He was dean, and he was a professor. When he came to UK, he applied for many lectureships and got rejected, and he didn't have the academic publication record to be a professor in the UK. Well, he's come in as a principal lecturer because he's got vast experience, but he didn't come in as a professor. And so basically, your track record has to be equivalent to a professor in a UK university. And there's a panel that actually decides whether you're worthy of that professorship or not. So a professor in the UK is an academic kind of rank rather than a grade. Is speciality in your subject. So you might be dean, you might be vice chancellor in somewhere, but you won't get a professorship in UK university. So one of my PhD students is the dean of faculty in Iraq. So when he came back here, you know, he's struggling to get a lectureship. So it's like, you know, if you're a star player playing for a lower division football club, can you play for Barcelona? Can you play for Manchester United? Obviously you can't. And then it's hard to go from a professor at Lincoln to being professor at Cambridge. Although they're equivalent, the standards are still not viewed as equivalent.
So say after a PhD, someone works very hard and does a postdoc and goes on to the, you know, become a lecturer, senior lecturer. Generally, how many years does it sort of take before you become a professor? Is it like 50 plus or below 50? Or?
Well, like I said, you know, many people, maybe 70% of them, they never become professors. Oh. So they'll stay a senior lecturer, principal lecturer, even lecturer. So, you know, we've got many examples where people started off a lecturer, became a senior lecturer, and just stayed in that position. So the number of years depends on, one, the demand in the subject that you're in. Secondly, your own drive and initiative. So you can become a professor very quickly, or you might never become a professor. So there isn't an average, in my opinion. But nowadays, people younger and younger are becoming professors. So when I became a professor, I was in my early 40s, and basically that was quick. But it still took me 8 years to get there.
Yeah, you showed a slide which says that for you, the next step promotion could be pro-vice chancellor or vice chancellor, but also we see that professors they also get appointed as advisors to the governments, and that, you know, we've had Sir David King and all these people from Oxford, Cambridge, and that.
Yeah, so you always get to, so if you kind of get well known in your field and there is a demand, so David King was a professor. He was head of department at Cambridge, and then obviously he had good connection with Tony Blair, and he became chief scientific advisor for the government. And if you're in a prestigious institution, you're well known, there's a demand there, the government is always looking for people to give them advice, and people with detailed subject knowledge. So basically, like with the coronavirus now, you've got a couple of professors that come on every day, and they're talking about the science of coronavirus and what's happening and how the cases are increasing and decreasing. So the government is always looking for experts to advise them in certain areas of need. But I don't know if there's a route of getting to be advisor to the government.
Okay. And how has COVID impacted academics? And obviously, you know, those people who do experimental sort of research and that are prevented, and it's all e-learning and that. How do you think, well, how would that impact?
So obviously COVID has had a huge impact because initially we were very reliant on the traditional methods of delivery. So you had your lectures, you had your tutorials, you had your workshops, and then you've got your lab classes. So because of this COVID, the lot of things got postponed. Lab classes had to be rearranged, so there's only very few people that can attend. So the timetable was all messed up. And we've all had to kind of adapt to e-learning. So whereas previously, many of them may not have had an interest on e-learning, but now everybody's got to deliver their materials online and be a bit more creative, a bit more sort of resourceful in getting and students have also had to adapt. So before it was like you were not allowed to do something online. Now it's the accepted standard. Same with meetings, you have to be face-to-face. But now we're having meetings virtually by Teams and other platforms. So it's changed the game quite a lot. In some way it might be good because universities build lots and lots of buildings, offices, stuff. But maybe if you can work from home when you don't need to go in, then it's better for everybody. And a lot of money is being lost because accommodation makes the university a lot of money. And if students are not in the accommodation, then the university will lose money. So financially, it's affected the university a lot. Few places are making people redundant because of the financial situation, particularly people coming from abroad. So certain universities have a big international uptake. And if they're not coming, they're going to lose, millions and millions of pounds, which means jobs have had to go and maybe more will go in the future. In Lincoln, we're relatively lucky because we don't have a lot of international students.
Okay, as a professor of nanoscience and nanotechnology, or those youngsters who want to sort of come and study and do PhDs in nanotechnology, what advice would you give? What are the areas that they could sort of, which are of interest to do PhDs in?
So nanotechnology, although it seems small, it's a multidisciplinary field. So people approach it from lots of different angles. So they approach it from sort of as a chemist, a material scientist, as an electrical engineer. So people approaching it from lots of different angles. So it's a multidisciplinary subject. So my opinion about nanotechnology is only nano compared to the different opinions in nanotechnology. So basically, obviously, nanotechnology applied to drug delivery and medicine, and that I think is very important. A lot of things on medical devices, nanotechnology in medical devices is very important.
Energy as well.
Nanotechnology in energy, renewable energy, architecture. So there's many different applications of nanotechnology. Energy is obviously very important in the agenda. Medical applications are very important in the agenda. So maybe Professor Smear's got a different perspective, or he can shed greater light on that area.
Who would you say is leading the nanotechnology research? Europe, Asia, US, UK.
It's difficult to say because it is multidisciplinary. Obviously, US is always think they're ahead of everybody else. In UK, you've got lots of different people with lots of different ideas. So people winning Nobel Prizes in graphene and croto, and people on molecular cages. So UK, as a small country, I think has done really well in nanotechnology. If you look at the number of publications that are coming up, India is coming up exponentially. China going up exponentially. Iran is publishing lots of papers on nanotechnology. US maybe, is like that, and other people are catching up. So it's difficult to say who the leading nanotechnology people are. But if you win the Nobel Prize, wherever you are in that particular area, you're the leading.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody can claim some kind of leadership because they always specialize in something, and they say, well, I'm more or less the best in the world in this narrow area.
Okay, do we have any other questions? If there's anything, Professor Samir, you would like to add or say before we wrap up? Okay, let me just check the Facebook if there's any other question. Probably not. Good to see Professor Werner Blau from Trinity College Dublin. He's joining, watching on Facebook Live. Okay, so let me see, is there another question here? No, I think, okay. So thank you very much, Professor Waqar Ahmed, for an excellent presentation. Oh, I think that there is something here. There is a question here. If we could, if you have PhD from Malaysia, what are the chances?
PhDs, chances of becoming a professor.
Getting a job here if you've got a PhD from Malaysia.
Again, you know, PhD by itself doesn't guarantee you will get a lectureship in the UK. If you've got a PhD, you've got a good publication, it's in a niche area where there's a lot of demand, then obviously there's always opportunity. But from my experience, what happens is we kind of discount ourselves for certain positions. So, for example, you apply for something in your own narrow field and you apply and you don't get in, you don't get in, you don't get in, and then you start assuming, oh, I can't get in, it's because of the competition, because of the discrimination, because of this. My degree was in chemistry. My first lectureship was on manufacturing technology. Then I got a lectureship in physical chemistry. And then my professorship was in nanotechnology in the Department of Electrical Engineering. Then I moved from electrical engineering to manufacturing engineering in Preston. Then I moved to be a professor of medicine, nanomedicine in the School of Medicine. Now I'm in maths and physics. So if you're resourceful enough, you'll find the opportunities. If you say it's difficult because I'm from Malaysia, it's difficult because I'm Asian, it's difficult, my field is narrow, it's difficult because, you know, whatever reason you've got, you're defeating yourself. And if you defeat yourself, nobody can help you. But if you say, well, I'm going to find a way, if I can't go that path, I'm going to go that path. If that's blocked, I'm going to go that way. If that's blocked, I'm going to go there. If you're determined enough and resourceful enough, you will get there. So all the time I've been told, yeah, you're not going to pass your GCSEs, you're not going to pass your A-levels, you're not going to get a lectureship, you're not going to get a job in industry, you don't have enough management experience, we're not looking for that, you know, goodbye, thank you very much. So other people will tell you you can't do it, but what's important is what you think. And you have to have the faith that if I try my best, sooner or later I will get there. But you also have to be intelligent. You can't just keep hitting your head against a brick wall and keep hitting it and hitting it and hitting it and complaining. Maybe you can walk around the brick wall. So I think it's your own attitude that actually limits you rather than, there's, you know, in any field, whatever origin you are, people will say, oh, if you're in boxing, or you're too slow, or you know, there's always an excuse other people will give you. But the important thing is what you believe inside your head. So if you're from Malaysia and you believe you can get in, and you'll find a way, you build the contacts, you will get in. So you have to find a way yourself. But if you give up, obviously, that's when you can't get in.
So this last question, so is this true that a PhD doesn't guarantee you a job, and two, it doesn't guarantee you a highly paid job? Or highly paid job?
Okay, so when I did my PhD, I went to work for a General Electric company. So I started at this level. Somebody with a degree and 3-year experience, they were higher than me and they were my bosses. So then I thought, oh, it's not worth doing a PhD. Look at that guy, he's got 3 years experience, he's getting paid £10,000 more than me. Oh, PhD was a complete waste of time. So basically what happens, this is where they start, and they were kind of just going up like that. But with a PhD, I was doing that. So eventually that line crosses. So wherever you go, if you get a PhD, nobody will doubt your intelligence anymore. They say, oh, Dr. Nasser, Dr. Waqar, Dr. X, Dr. Y. You'll always, they'll think, okay, this person is competent technically. So in life, there's no guarantees. Even if you get a job, even if you become the president, if you don't perform, you're going to go down. So constantly, you've got to be striving to get better and better and better and better. And if you're determined, you will get a job. So at the beginning, I doubted my decision to make a PhD. Now, I think it's the best thing that I've ever done. You know, if I didn't do that PhD, I wouldn't have had all these opportunities that I've had. So in education, knowledge can never damage you. It might not be useful immediately, but sooner or later, it's going to become important. So when I did my degree in biochemistry, I never used biochemistry. I thought, oh, was it a waste of time? Then when I moved to the School of Medicine, they asked me, what can you teach? So I can teach biochemistry. So knowledge is never wasted. Sooner or later, it will come useful to you. And obviously, you've got to keep applying it if you can. Find ways of using knowledge and you'll benefit in life.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor Ahmed. I think, yeah,
Thank you everybody for your attention.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. And I'm sure you've all learned something. And a lot of the youngsters who've been watching us, I'm sure we've sort of answered, Professor Ahmed answered your questions. And for those of you who missed this webinar, we will be uploading this on our YouTube channel, Young Professional Society. And thank you, those people who are joining us from the live stream on Facebook. Yes, thank you very much, and have a good night. And hopefully we'll look forward. You can join us in next week for our webinar. We'll keep you updated. And if you want to know more about Young Professional Society, please do visit our website, www.ypsociety.uk. Thank you very much and good night. God bless.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.